Palisade Radio is brought to you by First Majestic Silver Corp, one of the world's purest and fastest growing silver mining companies.
Welcome back to another episode of Palisade Radio. This is your host, Colin Cattell. On the line with us today is Ron Thiessen. He's the chairman of Taseko Mines. Ron, welcome to the program.
Nice to be here, Colin. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, we have a very interesting story that's been developing surrounding Taseko Mines and what one could call an activist investment group. This is a pretty big phenomenon that's been going on in the United States. Our friend Marin Katusa over at Katusa Research put together a piece that focuses on this particular story and a couple other ones in the Canadian resource space. It's called The Do's and Don'ts of Fund Activism in the Resource Sector. I want to try and provide a little bit of a backstory here as to what's going on, and then Ron, I'll turn it over to you to kind of fill things in. Essentially, Taseko controls the Gibraltar mine, which is the second largest copper producer in Canada. A group named Raging River Capital, which is this activist investor group, has taken up a large enough position in Taseko, over 5%, which allows them to go ahead and try to call a special meeting whereby they've requested to remove a few directors, including yourself, and shake up management of Taseko. I'm going to, at this point, Ron, turn things over to you to try to provide a little more clarity on how things developed here and fill in the gaps on my story.
Okay, sure. So, as you noted, RRC Raging River picked up enough stock, just over 5%, I think 5.1%, to engage us in a activist campaign and call a extraordinary meeting to replace a part of the board. Now, there is a protocol to all of this, and it's, these are not that unusual, especially as you pointed out in the United States. When an activist investor gets involved, they usually have some pretty specific complaints that they want, or issues that they want dealt with, and there usually is a standstill period during which the activist group and the management of the board engage with each other to discuss the issues. And I would have to say from the get-go, Raging River really wasn't interested at all in that engagement. We did say that this was the protocol, and that we welcomed the opportunity to address their concerns, and so we did manage to convince them to have a call with us. They weren't that prepared. Again, the protocol is that you produce a white paper that outlines the issues that you've got and your suggested changes to that. We didn't really get that. We got a list of questions, and that was about it. We had a pretty short call where they weren't really interested in what the answers were. They wanted to get to the actual process of calling the meeting. So, it's been, I'd say, pretty antagonistic from the get-go with respect to this, and you certainly see that in the proxy material that Raging River published. So that's how this all started up, and as I said, the Raging River guys proposed to replace 3 people on the board and nominate their own group to that. They want to leave the independent directors in place. They've told us more or less what their general concepts will be in moving the company forward. I find those, very, superficial. They're not really well thought out or any kind of detailed plan. So I'm very concerned that they actually haven't told us really what they want. If all they are planning to do is what they lay out in their management information circular, I think that's, pretty specious. It's not going to amount to anything. And I'd probably dismiss these guys as cranks or cracks, but that's not the case. I've looked into the background, and I don't think they are like that. But I also think they're very different than what they present themselves as. And as I have said before, I believe that they're really corporate raiders. They have an agenda, and that agenda is very different than the one that we read about. And that's to tell you the truth, they'd have to have a different agenda make something happen at Taseko that would be very, very different. And so from that standpoint, I don't think they've been transparent or truthful in what they've laid out. And basically it's been almost a personal attack instead of a truly corporate positive initiative. And that's one of the things that Marin was talking about, negative activism versus positive activism. Positive activism, you get involved with management, try and take advantage of what they have to offer, and you bring new things to the table, and you move forward on that basis. Negative activism is you're trying to get rid of the history and take things on for yourself. And if you, as the activist, have no history on those assets, then there's a real problem there, because how are you going to manage those things without any history? And especially in a case like Taseko Mines, where Gibraltar, the second largest copper producer in Canada, is the lowest grade copper mine, certainly in North America, one of the lowest grades in the world. It requires a great deal of efficiency and thought and paying attention to everything to make money at that mine, and that's what those guys do. Russ Hallbar's assembled an incredible operating team. Other mining companies come to Gibraltar to study the efficiency and the economics of that operation and how they can produce positive cash flow out of an operation like that. And they built that mine at a lower cost per throughput than probably any mine that I know of in the world. So it's a highly respected team, and to dismiss that team as they're don't know what they're doing, that you can step into their shoes and dramatically increase free cash flow in Gibraltar, I think is it's not even wishful thinking. It's just a specious attack on the management team. So basically, they've issued their information circular. Their business plan is to dispose of what they call redundant assets, which they say have zero value. And we beg to differ a great deal on that. These are an extremely valuable pipeline of assets. They do have an investor in their group who has previous history on one of these assets, and was desirous of having a large interest in it. And when that large interest wasn't forthcoming, I understand they did walk away, but now they've come back with the activist group. They talked about doing things at Gibraltar that would free up more free cash flow. They're simply, you can't do that. You can't defer stripping, which is, I think, what they're really talking about. Pushing that out, you end up sterilizing the ore body and turning a 28-year mine life into single digits, perhaps as short as 4 or 5 years, and that would be a disaster for that operation. There's almost 600 people working there. And, there's a relationship with Hunter Dickinson that they also sever, which, again, Taseko can do that anytime. There's no cost to making the severance in terms of a penalty or a fee. But a lot of what Taseko gets from HDI are things that would have to be replaced. I mean, they rent office space from us at the direct cost that the landlord charges HDI. So you're going to have to go out and get rental space. You're going to have to go out and probably hire a bunch of people. So you're not going to save any money. In fact, I would suggest that because of that association with HDI, there are things that come to Taseko at a lower price than they would otherwise achieve. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't use it, because that's the whole idea is to take the advantage of HDI's expertise, and in some cases HDI's buying power for drilling contracts and the like, and get lower costs. So I don't believe there's any money to be saved there.
Ron, just to clarify for our listeners, HDI Hunter Dickinson is a company that you're associated to that runs the back office operations for Taseko. Marin Katusa even argued, as you've just pointed out, that Taseko, by using the HDI as a back office and for certain negotiating powers, probably actually saving a good bit of money. Obviously, people initially looking at the situation that don't know might seem to think that you being the chairman of Taseko and also having a role at HDI, which is getting paid by Taseko, is a bit of a incestuous relationship. But I just wanted to point out that is, that is present, and they are using that. But that's, you're claiming, and Marin backs you up, that is not the case.
Yeah, well, let me just explain a little bit more. And Colin, you raise a very good point, because it could be a perception issue, and perception, sometimes takes precedence over reality. HDI is simply a captive service company. We do work for HDI-related companies, and the idea is, because mainly HDI is in the exploration and development phase of business, not necessarily mine operating. So we've got projects where geologists are out running exploration programs, and when that exploration program is over, the engineers step in and take over the project. So instead of the geologists being dismissed and terminated and go elsewhere, they'll move to the next exploration place. So we share services and find that we can keep a core staff of people available. So when any company that is in the HDI group wants to run an exploration program, they ask us to put together a team of people to do that. And that's basically 3 times Taseko's asked for us to run exploration programs, and that way they don't have to go out and hire exploration geologists. They don't have to take on the payroll. They don't have to take on the severance and all the rest. Plus, our guys are extremely experienced at doing that. We run several exploration programs in BC, so typically our drilling costs are, I dare say, well, I know in one instance when Gibraltar put out an RFP for an exploration drilling program at Gib, the HDI cost was 25% lower than the best bid price that the mine got. So, and we don't really run the back office. I wouldn't use that term. Taseko has its own accounting people, but what we will do for them, they'll need tax advice. Well, we have a tax practitioner within the group. They need some work on some legal documents. They can either go to Macmillan, their corporate counsel outside, or we have an in-house legal counsel. So for some legal transactions, minutes and document certification, and sometimes NDAs and CAs, they come and use the internal lawyer here, and they pay about $225 an hour for that lawyer, as opposed to paying $550 for an external lawyer. If they need some financial analysts, some specialty work done on a project, they can also ask us, because we have a couple of people that's what they do. So, and it's at their request. And in addition, the independent audit committee has to sign off quarterly and at the end of the year on all of those related party charges. And the auditors typically take a look at them as well, and look at them for reasonableness and, dare I say, the quantity of them. And the amount that HDI has, received for those charges is such a small, infinitesimal portion of the total expenditures of Taseko. It really is de minimis. But they are a related party. I mean, and again, there's nothing to stop the independents from telling management, we don't like the perception of this. We think that the perception is worse than the saving, and let's terminate that relationship. They can do that quite easily, and there's no cost to it.
So, Ron, we have about 7 or 8 minutes left in the interview here, and now that we've provided a pretty solid backstory for listeners, I want to address a couple questions I have. The first one being that one might assume an activist group in a market that we are in right now, where things are so beaten up and it's so easy to convince investors to kick management out and give another team a try, why they would go after, what somebody like Marin Katusa would say is a very well-run company like Taseko, with a mine that cannot be optimized optimized very easily. We've already touched on this, a very low-grade deposit that's being operated very efficiently. First question for you, why are they going after you?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that they haven't told us what that is, and so, my views are speculative, but, I've talked to a lot of people. We, as Taseko, have pushed very hard and actually have gone to court to force Raging River to make more disclosures. They went from a very nominal disclosure in the first instance to then disclosing, a pretty complex structure of ownership and investment in bonds and in stock and third-party investors. I mean, they don't even tell us how much the principals of Raging River have put in or how much stock the principals own. But there is obviously a compensation relationship from the bond side of the investors, so they get special compensation, the Raging River people, for improving values on the bond side. And so I think the ultimate game plan, and because I know some of the parties behind it here, is potentially the sale at, and they tell us in their management information circular that the value of the non-core assets is zero. So an asset like Florence, which has an asset value between $750 million and $1 billion, they're saying it has zero value because it's unproven technology. I can tell you, when I was on the phone with their expert, he talked about us doing column cell testing, and we said, well, where did you get the idea that any column cell testing was done? That the basis for your statement is totally incorrect. So how can you make an assessment that it's valueless unless you know what kind of work we did? And that was their expert. So what if they divest of Florence for next to nothing to a party that has shown a historical interest in owning a large position in it? Divestitures could result in bonds being paid at face value. Our bonds currently trade at probably a 50% discount. And so there's a huge upside in the bonds. I've also had somebody else point out to me that there's a couple of SPACs out there, special purpose acquisition corporations listed in New York. They're sitting on, a sizable sum of money that was raised for an acquisition. If that acquisition isn't completed, within the balance of this year, that money ends up being returned to those investors. So there's an opportunity to take Taseko and roll it into a company like that, and that's taking control of the company without offering the shareholders a premium. These guys have only bought 5%. They've got twice as much money invested in the bonds as they do in the stock. And I can tell you that the way corporate raiders work is they try and get significant interest in your debt, and then they try and take control of the board. And then they elevate the debt to a secured position and strip the assets. And I think that's the end game here. So I think it would be completely in Taseko's shareholders' interest to allow creditors to sit on the board of directors. And I've talked to some bondholders, and I've asked them directly. I'm nothing against my bondholders. We're going to pay these guys out at full value. We're going to pay them all their interest, and they're going to get their return. But would you come and sit on my board of directors, knowing that you're a bondholder and you have then two masters to look at? And to a person, they said, no, we wouldn't put ourselves in that conflicted role.
What's next, Ron, in terms of the process? How far are we along? How much progress has Raging River Capital made? Do you guys feel threatened to the point where there could be a decision soon and you guys are out? How does it work?
Well, the meeting is May 20th, so we've still got a ways to run here, a month and a half. Our management information circular just hit the street late last week, and I think it is very comprehensive. It addresses all of the things that Raging River raises, and then some in a lot of detail. We're doing our outreach now to shareholders. I mean, I've talked to most of the big shareholders, and or other board members have, and I don't find any of the people that I've talked to who are remotely interested in supporting Raging River. and from our advisors who've been on the phones with retail investors, we're getting a very high response rate of support for management. And I mean, there's some core large groups of shareholders. Not all are institutional, but we do have a fairly decent-sized retail, so there's a fair amount to put out there. But again, I would say insiders, some of the big institutions. There's really only one institution so far that's come out against us, and they have, I believe, more money invested in the bonds than the shares. And I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day that sometimes these activist things can also elevate the value in the short term of bonds or share prices. So just somebody wanting you can make others say, well, this is a good game that it's on, but at the end of the day, we actually have to vote for the people that know how to run this company and ensure that it delivers for its shareholders at the end of the day. So, I don't think there's going to be too much happen other than there'll be some more things in the press, but shareholders should read the information circulars. They should vote the yellow proxy, and on May the 20th, we'll see when the dust settles. I'm confident. And to tell you the honest truth, most of these activist campaigns are unsuccessful for the activists. And that's why typically they do other things to try and cover their potential losses, which, again, could be part of the bond play.
And, this whole thing came about by Raging River acquiring just a 5% stake. I don't think it was very long ago that they purchased that block off of two other groups, and that's allowed them to put forth this requisition for the shareholder meeting and initiate this whole process, which I can imagine has been a costly and time-consuming process for management. Obviously, in a public company, there needs to be a balance that allows unhappy shareholders to come in and try to make a change. But now that you've gone through this, do you think that the rules in Canada that have allowed this to happen on the exchange, without putting yourself in a murky situation, do you feel that this is the best way and this is how things should be allowed to happen?
Actually, to tell you the truth, I don't. I don't know if 5% or 10% should be the threshold, but I think that length of ownership should come into play here. I don't think you should be able to do something like this unless you've owned the position for at least 6 months and really 12 months, and that you made a conscientious effort to engage with management and the board. I mean, these guys, I think Raging River was set up in November or December. They acquired their share position in January, and they launched. They never had any intention of real engagement. Their intention has grabbed control of the board and force the company to do things that they want to do. So, I just can't believe that the shareholders, wouldn't see through that. I mean, the cartoons in their information circular, okay, they're entertaining. They got some guy wearing a mask dragging an HDI bag, but it is a cartoon.
Very true. Well, Ron, for listeners that want to find out more, maybe from a slightly biased opinion, but a very good read, go to katusaresearch.com, and that has Marin's very detailed piece to give more information. Also, if any investors in Taseko are interested in finding out more, Ron, should they reach out directly to you, or who can they talk to get more information?
They can call me, contact me, or they can go through investor relations at Taseko, which is on the web, and I'm happy to talk to investors as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, Ron, thanks so much for coming on the show. I know times are busy right now, and stress is probably running a little higher than normal. Appreciate getting your side of the story and educating our listeners on activist investing in Canada.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks for the opportunity.
Think you understand the junior mining sector, and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, Hey, troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen, or are you too stupid?